You ever notice that whenever somebody talks about AI, it generally sounds the same? It's going to change everything. It's going to transform everything. It's either going to save you or replace you. And you feel sometimes like you're missing something. And the truth is, you're not missing anything. People talk about AI like it's magic. And then you look at your profit and loss and you look at the work around you and the workload that you continue to have, and you realize the magic is missing. And that's not our opinion. That's Stanford, their AI index that studied this in 2026, and MIT, who did a very similar study. Today, we're going to explain how to bridge that gap between an AI strategy that results in boosting your profit and loss in a measurable way and an AI situation, and how the bridge between that strategy and situation is governance. Today, we're joined by experts in governance, risk, and compliance, Chief Information Security Officers Scott Logan and Braxton Molton, who head up and lead our cybersecurity practice here at NetGain Technologies. Scott Logan, Director of Security, leads NetGain's security practice and will guide us through AI risk, security, and emerging threats. Braxton Molton, Technical Director of Security. Braxton focuses on governance, compliance, and helping organizations build structured, policy-driven approaches to new technologies like AI. Gentlemen, welcome. Look forward to having this discussion.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
So, Scott, let's start off with you. When companies start thinking about AI, they generally want to jump straight into the tools. The bells and whistles, the things that are posted often on social media and on YouTube videos and things like that. Why is it so important to start this kind of phase rollout approach instead? I'm showing on the screen kind of an AI rollout strategy.
Yeah, you're right. People just want to start getting their hands dirty with every tool that's out there and available, and that's just not good strategy. Starting with a phase rollout really matters in good AI adoption. It allows you to be more controlling, set parameters, set guidelines, and guardrails about how you're going to use your systems. Without doing a phase rollout, you get unpredictable outcomes. You get unclear business values. You get, poor fit in how workflows are going to work in relationship to the AI rollout and the AI expectations. You get unmeasurable risk exposures associated to potential security and compliance failures, to where you could actually put the business at risk with the information that's being exposed in AI tools that are not properly structured, set up, licensed. You usually get low adoption. You don't get buy-in by the business from the executive leadership team down to individual users. They lose their focus and buy-in into what we're trying to do for the business. Using this phase rollout allows you to be more prepared, more educated in what you're trying to achieve in the AI tool set, and put a governing body around it so that you are protecting the information that you're processing through the AI tools.
Great points. From a business sense too, not even talking about the risk that the technology, inappropriate rollouts or speeding, just trying to run really fast and roll out tools. Even that aside, you miss a lot of profitable opportunities. You miss a lot of chances to actually develop metrics and KPIs and find the time savings and the productivity and the efficiencies so that you can measure it in P&L at the end of the year. And that's really where, if there is any magic in the technology, that's really where it lies, right? Because it's measurable and you're able to see by doing this phased rollout approach, we've seen like you're able to measure it and then the organization can actually relay that to stakeholders about how they're actually leveraging AI to improve the business.
Absolutely. A phased rollout, it reduces your risk, it improves your learning. It's more likely that the AI delivers a measurable value, like you were saying, and it's less a expensive experiment.
Right. And Braxton, from a governance standpoint, at what stage should companies start thinking about policies and controls? Like, is that something that comes later, or should it be done before they start playing with tools?
Ideally, it's done before. And if you're already behind, the second best time is right now.
It's right now. Yeah, exactly.
Start from anything regarding governance or any sort of cybersecurity controls. This isn't unique to AI necessarily.
Correct. Yeah. Great point, actually. That's a really important point.
Yeah, you need to start from top down, from a policy perspective of, what does the business want? What is the expectation of what we want to do with these tools and the data that's input into them or anything that's output from these tools, and start from there. So the challenge with AI is that it's exploded, pretty much unlike anything we've ever seen before in this space. From, it's like a cyber pandemic almost, in terms of how many different types of tools and things that we've seen that all, leverage certain types of models and so on and so forth. So it's been challenging for all businesses to kind of tamp all of that down, which is why we say you need to really just get started on this right away. But once you have those expectations from the business of what you want to do with those things, it gives you your own kind of guideline and framework with, what tools do you want to use, if any, and then what's acceptable within the use of those tools.
Absolutely. I mean, and addressing it at the outset is key. Ideally, before people start playing with tools and doing it, but as we've talked about, people are already doing it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, Scott, I wanted to ask you from a security perspective, like, where in this timeline that we're showing on the screen do risks start to show up most often?
I think early in your discovery and planning stages, you start to have problems or can experience problems with, I mentioned before, executive disengagement. People just don't get involved or want to provide the input needed for it to be successful. You have unclear goals. You're trying to make decisions about the business, but you really don't understand what it is that you want to get to. Your planning stages have to be formatted and put into a measurable goal so that you can get where you want to get in the AI. And I think there's a lot of that lost in the planning stages. They're just not clear. They're not focused. But I think the highest point of failure is probably in the piloting area. That's where you start getting scope creep. You start getting resource issues like license and token issues, GPU expectations and allowances aren't properly aligned for it to do the calculations that you're asking it to do. A lot of the times, and we've seen this ourselves internally at NetGain, we put a lot of power into the AI for it to generate an output that we're expecting, and it eats up your tokens. All of a sudden you no longer can use the tool because it's exhausted, or you don't have the GPU power for it to calculate, and so it does all this calculation and then it ends up failing in the end. So
that's a really great point you just brought up, and that is token management, right, is the next iteration of rolling out AI, that people that haven't started and that are just letting shadow AI pop up and just, hey, everybody, we got 100, subscriptions and an email, and that's their AI strategy, right? That's pretty common. That's very common. And it's like, that's not a strategy, that's a situation. And what happens is, in addition to the governance lacking and the security risk and the intellectual property leakage and the public disclosure, in addition to that, without the governance in place, right, and visibility, tokens, like, you're not even going to be able to use the tool as best as you can, because the tokens, for those that don't know, are the credits. Think of a video game. It's the amount of credits you have, right? It's the amount of time the game will let you play. And using AI without governance, like, it misaligns the token usage, and you burn it out, and you're not even able to continue or complete certain projects. You have to wait 3 days until your tokens replenish and things like that. And in the future, that's why they're building so many data centers, right? They're really trying to build up the capacity for it.
David, you brought up shadow AI, and I just want to jump in real fast and note that there is a high potential that you already have this risk. So, in terms of Scott's question of when did these risks show up, it could potentially already have risks prior to any sort of AI rollout strategy, because your employees could
100%.
be using. I don't know if philosophically you'd call them shadow AI if you don't have restrictions on what tools you can use or not, but that's more of a semantic argument. But anyway, shadow AI could already be in use by your employees. They could be pumping things into Chat GPT that you're totally not aware of, because you don't have any sort of policy, you don't have any sort of technical controls in place to help kind of restrict that. So that is a risk that could be present prior to the business even thinking about it.
Yeah, and I would say there are several reports that have come out this year about shadow AI, and we will send them to anybody that is registered for the webinar. We're happy to send over all of the resources that we rely on. And Assurian did a comprehensive study on the use of technology by U.S. employees, and they found that mobile devices are picked up around 264 times a day on average by the American adult worker. 264 times. If every one of your employees is picking up their phones 264 times, and there's blurred lines between their home lives and work, right? Somebody could be texting their husband, somebody could be looking up the score, and somebody could be using an AI tool. If AI is one swipe away and they're picking up their phones that often, right? That is shadow AI. That is a risk. And because leadership has no control over those phones. And so it really is something that needs to get ahead of it, like you said, in the beginning. And if not, today is the best day to start. Make sense?
Absolutely.
So security, governance, and control. Let's talk about some data that employees should not be putting in their AI tools, whether they're, popping on their phones or at work and they're using, whether they're approved tools or not approved tools. Scott, the list here, it's pretty eye-opening. What are these types of, explain us, kind of break it down for us. Like, why is this type of data so especially dangerous to input into AI?
It's dangerous for a lot of different reasons. Probably number one is that it has the potential of the data becoming part of the model. When you input sensitive data into commercial AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude API, whatever, it may be retained and used for model training, stored indefinitely. There's no
getting it back.
There's no guarantee of its deletion.
Right.
I mean, you really can't control it. It's an uncontrollable spread. that could leak into other AI tools that you're using in your organization. Um, it's just very dangerous. And when you look at compliance and legal violations, um, compliance controls like GDPR and HIPAA and SOC 2 and others, uh, you could be using unauthorized tools that aren't allowed to own or have that data. Um, HIPAA, for example, you have to use a HIPAA compliant AI tool in order to put HIPAA related information into that tool. Uh, you could experience violations and actual fines associated with data leakage associated to putting sensitive information like healthcare information into an unregulated and uncompliant tool.
Absolutely, especially in light of the new security rule that's anticipated to come out. It's getting even more restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
I always, just let me share this real quick. I always think of, I actually spoke with a nurse, busy nurse, great employee, right? Loved by leadership, very, very busy, pulls out her phone after seeing a patient, dictates into an AI that she downloaded. I think it was Whisper, one of them. The name doesn't matter. And then just kind of copied and pasted that right over into the EHR and the electronic medical record. 3 HIPAA violations in 30 seconds. 3, and nobody saw it. Nobody could control it. And she wasn't trying to do it, right? It's just something that happens. And regardless of whether it's compliant or not, you still have that risk. Let's say you're in an unregulated industry. You still have that risk of losing intellectual property and things like that.
HIPAA fines have been up to $50,000 per violation.
Yeah, and that was 3 in 30 seconds, right? And so you're like, how? That is not something that most healthcare organizations, especially the rural, not nonprofit ones, right? They're not prepared for this. And so, Braxton, how can organizations think about creating guardrails around this?
Well, I'll reiterate what I was talking about earlier and look at your policy and make sure that you understand what types of data are in use in your organization and how sensitive they are. Some businesses, it's pretty straightforward, how sensitive certain data is, like healthcare, banking, things like that. But if you're an unregulated business, you still hold on to things that are sensitive that you probably don't immediately come to mind. Anything PII, personally identifiable information, anything regarding names, addresses, employee information, proprietary information for your business, all of that is sensitive and things that you don't want to get out. So making sure you have some pretty mature and strong policy regarding that, understanding how your data is classified and labeled, and having something from an administrative perspective that restricts to your employees what they're allowed to use and where their data should be and where it should go. That's one thing. The next piece is more difficult, and it is like actual technical enforcement of restrictions. So the challenge with AI is that it comes in many different ways. It can be used through web. It can be a desktop app. It's agentic. Cloud Cowork literally interacts with your computer and just does tasks for you. That's how powerful it is. So you have to have several tools in place to really kind of lock that down. So web filtering to restrict certain URLs that you can access, or just category blocking. Most firewalls nowadays have a capability. You usually have to license it, but you can lock down certain applications in use. So some firewalls will see, ChatGPT as an application or Copilot as an application. You can restrict it that way. You might have to do application blacklisting or whitelisting on, your endpoint solution. The list kind of goes on, David. So that's why it's so difficult to restrict it from a technical perspective, because it propagates itself and has many different vectors with which it can enter your organization. So start with policy, then look at technical controls.
Yeah, and really getting a handle on it, right? I mean, really understanding everything that everybody is using to begin with, right? Having a good assessment, having a good roadmap just from the beginning would help, right? Just from a business owner perspective or a
Mhm.
leadership perspective, just knowing what everybody is using to start with, so that way you know, well, what controls or what technical controls do we have to consider putting in place in order to restrict this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And one thing we want to point out before we go on to the next slide is it's ironic because unlike other technologies, AI actually explodes and becomes more creative the more you clamp it down, right? There's leadership oftentimes calls us the department of no, right? Because like, hey, we want to roll this out. No, it's going to be a big security risk. Hey, we want to do this. No, let's do it. Let's wait on that until we test it and vet it out. With AI, by clamping it down, you're actually creating more creativity and more freedom for the users. They are now able, when a sandboxed version and something that allows individual users to personalize and customize the outputs of that based on their own work, being able to do that in a compliant and secure way gives them more freedom. So the output is better, and then the results are better, and the time savings increase, and that leads to increase in P&L. So it's one of those things, by securing it down more, you actually create more freedom. So that's what I always find is the irony of AI.
Yeah, if I could put that in a practical example, David.
Yeah, please.
So, like, let's restrict an AI tool from not training itself off of the data you provide it. You're
Right.
restricting that tool.
Right.
You're limiting its capabilities. But to the end user, now I can be less concerned about what I'm giving it. Now
Exactly.
I can utilize the tool to I can utilize the tool more to what's provided to me,
Yeah.
without having to be as in depth of a human firewall behind what I'm giving the AI. So
Absolutely. So when we think of early adoption and change management, these are all what's displayed on the screen here are all things that we've seen. When, we have assisted several organizations in the past year roll out AI, develop KPIs, see good results in the P&L. We've also been engaged where organizations have just started to run and jump with tools and do things right away. And they've gone down the wrong path. There have been issues, some of them very serious. And so we have to scale, roll back some of that, and then roll it out. One of the biggest challenges we still see when discussing AI with leadership is they either think it's just a tool, like it's just a tool, it's just a, like any other technical product out there. They just need to roll it out and manage the project like anything else. And then they start running without having full governance, like a whole model that clamps it down, restricts it across the board, but then creates that freedom. And again, it's just not, it's not magic, right? It's not going to automatically transform everything. But once it is set, we've literally seen it, be extremely powerful. It is transformational when it's done properly. And so I want to ask you, Braxton, how important is structured training versus just letting an employee figure it out? So typical scenario is one client we worked with had, invested in AI, bought 100 licenses, sent out the email. That was it. That's the AI, launch. And then we got engaged, and we're like, well, that's not structure. Like we need to, implement governance. And now it's totally different, right? Now there's structured training involved, and really getting everybody to be aware of the risks and how to leverage it. So how important is that to actually have that structure around the training of the use of the actual technology?
Well, I have no doubt that, all employees for all businesses are smart and, they know how to do their job, obviously. But with a tool like anything like AI, I mean, even if we're talking about, let's just stick with ChatGPT, for example, because it's probably the most popular one out there and everyone will know it. But if you don't have any sort of like decent training for your employees on how to structure a prompt, you're going to get incredibly varied results to the efficiency of whatever task you're giving. There is some massaging that's required to the prompts that you provide to ChatGPT. The more general your request and what you feed it, the more general the output you're going to get from ChatGPT. So you can't just say, like, hey, here's a couple of Excel spreadsheets, do these calculations, without providing it, what you're looking for, what you need the output to look like. If it runs into this issue, do this. Like, these are the types of things that it needs to understand. You, as the employee, nuance to your job. The model does not, and you have to feed it that. So if you, like in your example, if you just buy 100 licenses for an AI tool and you send out an email to all employees like, hey, here's the link, have fun, have at it.
Right.
Well, number one, your adoption rate is probably going to be not great. Number two, your employees aren't going to really know how to use it to the full efficacy of what it can do. So you're losing just a lot of opportunity cost and money, and the investment, your ROI on that isn't going to be great. But also, from a cybersecurity perspective, structured training is standard. That's a standard cybersecurity control. You need to have training that's enforced for all your employees. You need everybody, reading from the same book, everybody singing from the same hymnal, as you might have heard in Kentucky. But so that cybersecurity training, again, that's not unique to AI. That's general. That's in almost all frameworks you're ever going to read ever about cybersecurity, is that there's structured employee training. So you want training that's specific to AI about what to consider regarding cybersecurity use. You want training that's specific to the AI tool in use so that your employees know how to use it, and that the business gets its money's worth from the inclusion of that tool in its operations.
Absolutely. Scott, how do you encourage experimentation with AI while still keeping things secure?
Yeah, setting up a sandbox environment where you're keeping everything controlled is the best way to start. If you're going to do any experimentation in AI, don't just do it publicly. We already mentioned utilizing an enterprise grade AI tool in your selection of what type of AI to use. Proper DPAs obviously need to be established. Those are data processing agreements that are structured around AIs. That way you're controlling the compliance requirements as well. You want to limit your sandbox accounts, who has access to it. You want to keep it in a very small area of use so that you can control the metrics and control the spread of the information, or eliminate the spread of the information. You want to preload it with dummy synthetic information. You don't want to use your sensitive data that we talked about earlier in the sandboxing, so that you can experiment with its findings without any release of sensitive information. You want to put clear labels on everything that you put through, and kind of structure your sandboxing so that you understand its output, or at least what your goal of the output is. But by keeping it in a smaller sandboxing type of delivery, you're going to have more defined output that's going to be pushing you towards proper goals and getting good access to it. You want to keep that access probably time-based. You want to keep your sandboxing where it's not unlimited. You want to keep it in control of so many days, maybe a 30, 60-day window of its allowances. That way you have good metrics on its output. So that's probably the best way of doing it than just letting willy-nilly go on your AI plats.
Yeah, and you just mentioned something really important, and that is the having visibility so that you can develop the metrics. Because again, as leaders, the goal is to make an investment that increases efficiency, productivity, has a positive effect on the P&L at the end of the year. And to do that, it requires governance because you need to have visibility, right? There's no visibility once stuff is launched into the central data pool of the LLM, but there is visibility into the technology use that users use to do that, right? And so having that visibility, establishing that governance and the structured rollout allows you the metrics like KPIs. Like, before AI, we were doing X and Y and it was taking X amount of time. Now with AI, we've been able to build agents and we've been able to build workflows, and now it only takes this. So now the time that we spend is less manual, less custodial, and more strategic. And by tracking that, right, you're able to actually have line items on your P&L that are positive, right? That are actually moving the needle in the right way. And AI becomes less magic and more structured investment into something that can be transformational. Now, to get there, though, you have to have visibility. You have to have the technical eyes on glass to be able to see this and to have protections in place that restrict or limit the ability to inadvertently or intentionally, lose your intellectual property, release sensitive information, things like that. And that is that kind of sandbox that you were talking about, right, Scott?
Yep, exactly. Keeping that under control allows you to control your metrics.
Yep. So once AI is in motion, the next challenge is understanding where you stand and how to improve. So, the stages here are pretty clear. I mean, having a clear rollout strategy, putting the right security and governance in place, supporting employees through the adoption, right? And Braxton, you brought up a really good point, and that is through the training, putting in generic prompts. Once you have sandbox environment, compliant environment, the approved tool sets, the policies in place, eyes on glass, then the creativity can start. But then the training of the users and being able to prompt and get results. And we've seen phenomenal results change now where you can train the AIs to actually not just sound less robotic, using here's the kicker and the vast digital age and, some of that slop that people see, because when everybody is doing the same thing, then it sounds like everybody and nobody at the same time. But by being able to train it and by being able to personalize through prompting, right, then you're not only able to make it sound less robotic and more human, but you're able to, in a safe environment, able to upload your writings and train it on your idiosyncrasies, your own individual style. So it doesn't even just sound more human. It sounds more like this human. Like it sounds more like you. And that is what really speeds up the time, because now you're not just inputting and getting an output. You're able to actually get something that saved you hours of work, and it only takes you minutes to review and make any final tweaks. So the labor, the actual hard, long periods of time that get burned is done by the AI, which is really what it's designed to do. And then you're able to put your final touches on it right at the end and then give it out to your intended recipient. It's really, really quite remarkable. Braxton, from a governance standpoint, what changes as organizations move up in the maturity curve? As an organization becomes more mature in AI, what type of changes are found?
It's a good question, David. From a governance standpoint, maybe not as much as you would think. If
Yeah.
you're setting up the policy the right way, and there is, for example, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, they have an AI risk framework.
Correct.
If you set up a policy that kind of follows that framework, should be pretty applicable to any new advent of AI and any new AI tool that's in use. So I would say probably the major things that change, maybe not necessarily governance related. They could be from a technical standpoint. They could be operational. They could be, after we've done a pilot and, we're moving forward with the tool. And, over some time with the review of metrics, we'll see, are we getting the right outputs that we want from this thing? Is it providing positive results for efficiency for employees? These tools get better, they get stronger. So we might move on from just using ChatGPT to allowing a few people to use Claude Cowork, for example, which I mentioned earlier. And now that's, something that actually has pretty much full control over your computer if you really wanted to have that, and it can run tasks for you and do things as if you were on the computer itself. And those are things that you have to start to consider as you mature more in the use of AI for the business. But from governance, if you have a strong foundation, again, it's a great guideline, a great framework. You should be able to navigate that as you mature in AI without too many roadblocks. You'll still have all the same hurdles like training and compliance and all these things that they could evolve as the use of AI gets more advanced for your business, but you would have been doing those things already. So the complexity might increase a little bit for you, but the general cornerstones are still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, similar question. How does the security posture change as they move up in the maturity scale?
Well, I mean, Braxton kind of touched on this earlier when he was addressing shadow AI and governance. The elimination of shadow AI use is probably the first part of your security. You're trying to control what type of AI is going to be used in the organization, and where you're going to be putting your information into. That's probably where you start. Then you go to your governance and awareness. Establishing acceptable use policies, controlling what your employees can and cannot do in the AI platform is a necessity of your security rollout as a big part of getting it aligned to the business. What the business wants the employees to do and how they're going to be using the platform needs to be expressed in policy, so that you've got something that you can incorporate control over through your employees. You're probably going to have employees that still use shadow AI on their phones or other elements like that, but you're trying to control it. And this is where the security starts. It starts in policy and in governance, and then it goes into tools that Braxton was mentioning earlier as well, in some of the ways to protect or eliminate, blacklists of AI products or DLP, data loss prevention solutions that can recognize when sensitive information is being processed or outputted, and can eliminate it and stop it. A lot of different ways to incorporate security, but it is so important as the foundational control behind anything, even beyond AI, that you do in the enterprise. You have to have security first, and it starts with governance and it starts with policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I find when I'm speaking with organizations and their leadership is they tend to feel they are more mature at the beginning in terms of how they're handling AI until after we're working with them for a little bit. Because after we're working with them for a little bit, they realize the questions they hadn't asked themselves, right? And so I'd love to get both of your perspectives. Kind of what's a sign that you're seeing that an organization or a company is not as mature as they thought they were when it comes to
If they don't have a very good grasp of what is even in use, obviously that seems
AI?
like a pretty major red flag, because I think the reality is that no matter how small the business, you're probably going to have at least one person that is, relatively keen on the use of AI and is probably going to be leveraging it for all kinds of reasons. Um, if you review their policy, like say you review acceptable use, it doesn't specifically call out AI. If they don't have an AI use policy, maybe it doesn't explicitly call those things out. This is a section of or a subsection of cybersecurity tools and just IT tools, really, that it's big enough to deserve probably its own thing by now, because it's so expansive and is a pretty complex issue. Um, so if they're not updating their policies accordingly, if they don't seem to have a good ear to the ground about how their business is leveraging it today, or if at all, these are some pretty major things that would immediately raise an eyebrow to me to make me ask some more penetrating questions about how they're handling that type of thing.
Absolutely. Scott,
Yeah,
any input?
I think he's spot on. I think one of the areas that's probably going to be gapped in most AI usage is the monitoring piece. I think
Mm-hmm.
immature businesses are not going to know where the data is going. They're not going to be able to identify or be able to track any of that. The absence of monitoring is a huge immaturity in businesses when utilizing AI. I think mature organizations can clearly specify and can clearly dictate that we block shadow AI. We ban Chat GTP, for example. Those are mature organizations. Those that can't absolutely guarantee that are immature, and the inability to monitor the information that AI outputs and AI ingests is a immature flag.
Yeah. And you don't mean ChatGPT specifically. You mean like the
Exactly.
free or consumer version, but if the group is rolling out the enterprise version and has built sandboxes and policies and things like that, then that given
That's
the organization, that's
more
a more
mature.
mature approach, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. I just didn't want OpenAI to send us a letter. So
That's true.
you know, so to recap, and this is something that we've been doing with organizations for a year now. It's really helpful. This is complimentary. Okay, we're not trying to, we don't charge for this, but it is really really useful. We offer an AI workshop. It is a design to help organizations recognize where they are on the scale and then to develop a roadmap and to make good decisions and ask themselves the right questions when they're addressing AI. It's really, really helpful. The organizations that have engaged with us on us have all found a lot of value in it. And it also addresses kind of, once it's built, how do we boost that creativity? How do we train our users on the prompt training? What are some of the best practices? What are some of the best, personalization prompts? There's a whole list of ways that we've been assisting organizations. So we encourage everyone, scan the QR code, follow up with us, reach out. We promise you're going to find a lot of value in these workshops. They're not technical. They're more creative and business oriented and really give you a good next step and, clear path to really, bridging that gap between, AI's magic and actually getting that good result in the profit and loss at the end of the year. So thank you, gentlemen, both for your insight today. I mean that. Thank you so much. It was really helpful to understand what governance means and how it plays out in reality. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, David.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.